Good afternoon. I am Rachel Humphrey on behalf of DEI Advisors, and today I am delighted to welcome to the show Lisa Lombardo. Lisa, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Rachel. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, Lisa, we're going to spend about 30 minutes together today covering a whole range of things from your path to leadership to some of the lessons that you've learned along the way. And at some point, I will share with everyone how I know you and why I am so inspired by you and admire you so much. But let's jump right in and start off with your journey to leadership. One of the things I really love about the hospitality industry is how incredibly different each of our paths is. So tell us a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today and where you are today.
So my journey to leadership probably hinges mostly on a mindset and a heart set of wanting to be of service. So the title of leadership, and it's not as though I don't see myself as a leader, but it's just been a calling and I think an expectation in the way that I was brought up that you always have something to give and to be of service to others. So it comes very much so from the examples of my parents, my mom, who was an educator, and my dad, who ended up as a local elected official. But they both started out in law enforcement. That's how they met. It's a really adorable story. And they stayed in service throughout the bulk of their career. And so whether it just is out of, inspired by faith and feeling like what you have, what can you give back? But that mindset of service. And as I was growing up and thinking about what did I want to do, and you and I just recently had this conversation, but I ended up in the nonprofit world. And I started out my career in fund development, so raising money for nonprofits. And I was very interested in matching people's capacity with their affinity or their passion for that particular cause. So I discovered that I'm a really good serial connector, just self-professed serial connector, both of people to one another or to causes, but also in encouraging them to maybe give beyond and exceed their own perceived expectations of what they're either capable of in life, which is where I ended up now, and helping people to develop professionally. But at the time, it was we have a goal as an organization we're trying to reach, and how do we match people's capacity to help us with their passion for our cause? And that evolved into a lot of different things over the course of my career, but taking that particular skill set and the ability to do that has led me into some really amazing opportunities. So it started in fund development in higher education. I got approached by somebody who became one of my best friends in life, helped him accomplish something really amazing for a friend of his in the entertainment space in memory of their son who had passed. And we established a scholarship in memory of his son. And that person came back to me 2 years later and said, I think you should come to work for me. And I said, there's really nothing in your space that correlates to what I do. It was an event marketing space. I had a heart for nonprofits. And he said, how are you different than you were when I met you 2 years ago? And I was like, oh, and I couldn't put a finger on professionally what I was doing that was much different. And so what I thought was a trajectory that I was going to be on, he said, but what do you want to do? I said, well, I'm kind of a teacher at heart. I love teaching people how to do things. And he said, well, why don't you go and teach people how to do what you've done? And I had some really cool success relatively early on in my career. I mean, institutions, single largest gifts, 7-figure gifts for organizations you wouldn't think get 7-figure gifts. And he said, if you can get some clients, then you could start a consulting division within my company and you could go on the road and do this. So I did. I mean, I took a crazy pay cut and went off and was working with boards of directors and again, matching what it is they were trying to accomplish with their capacity to do that, but then let's stretch and reach a little bit further. And when you're working with nonprofits, you're interfacing with boards of directors who are the heads of their companies. And so that led to them saying, what you're doing here and helping us consolidate and refocus on our why and what our vision really is and how we're going to accomplish that. And then to just kick our tails into action and show us how to get it done. And we could use that in my company. And so then I started working with for-profit. So it turned out that while my affinity for the nonprofit world, I thought that was my mission, was to be in that space, but my mission field was actually something beyond that. And now I've had an opportunity to work with and lead incredible leaders toward achieving some ridiculous outcomes, launching global brands, worked in manufacturing, construction companies, financial institutions, the arts, higher ed. I've been all over the place. And then I came into the hospitality realm, stumbled in thinking I was going to diversify my portfolio. And it ended up with a job description being slid across the table, and it gave me pause. And so I came in-house, and I'm the Chief Culture and Strategy Officer for HDG Hotels. So that's my journey there. But it all comes from serving and just wanting people to, again, exceed their own perceived expectations.
That's an incredible story and so many really great life lessons in there. I want to talk on a couple of those. You just mentioned that you started off in the nonprofit world, but you are also known in the hospitality industry for your incredible passion and commitment for the trade associations who help lead the industry, for your advocacy efforts. We talk about advocating for ourselves, but also in this particular instance, we're talking about advocating for in the government affairs space at the Capitol Hill, in Florida, at your state and local communities as well. What are some of the leadership traits that you think help in your corporate world that you develop through those association experiences, through your advocacy efforts?
Gosh, leadership traits. I think with advocacy, a lot of times you have to be inclusive, meaning it's good to bring other people with you and have them at the table. One of the things I think that has helped me, whether it was in advocacy or in different times in my career, is that I'm not afraid to bring somebody else along so that their voice can be the one heard. It's when knowing you're not the best messenger. I mean, you may be able to share the message, and I may have confidence in my ability to tell the story, but am I the right messenger? And I think sometimes associations, and I've been extremely humbled by how open folks have been to me being a part of telling the story, because I do feel very passionately about what our industry means to so many, and I'm extremely connected to and protective of our people. I mean, I'm obsessed with our people. But I think knowing when you are the right messenger and knowing when you're not, and how to pass that baton and create an opportunity for somebody else to share their stories. Maybe that's having lack of ego in it, because the goal is to make sure that people do understand. The other thing that I always make a point to do when we have one of those meetings is, when I go in, gratitude is a big thing with me. I sign all of my emails grateful, and it's not a part of my signature automatically. So every time you see an email and it ends with grateful, it's because I've just written those words. I think that that's important. But carrying that into a meeting and thanking folks for their time, thanking them for their position on an issue that maybe we've been dealing with, thanking them for remaining consistent, because Rachel, these things do not happen in one year. I mean, some of these things take years to move the needle, and sometimes it just moves a little bit. But then at the end of it, always asking what's on their radar, being open to. It's not just about, well, let me tell you what's going on in our world and what you're going to do about it and making the ask, but it's about at least if the end is the perfect time to do it, to say, what's on your radar? Is there anything that you could use our help with? What could we take out from here and be a messenger for you? We do a lot of roundtables here at HDG. When COVID started, we brought in a lot of industry leaders from all over the state to just come here and have a conversation in that May of 2020 about what we were doing to be open. And when we got together, what I told the group was, the goal here is that when we leave, we are able to tell somebody else's story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to take away from us being advocates for ourselves, because if we all trust and have benefit of the doubt in me putting this out there, you're going to leave and you're going to tell our story to somebody else. And it's likely going to carry a little bit more weight because you're the CEO of a hospital talking about what's being done within the hospitality industry. And likewise, I'm in the hospitality industry telling specific stories about what you've shared in the medical field. So I think gratitude, asking what it is that they need, and knowing when you are and are not the best messenger.
I mean, those are great lessons. I think as well, knowing whether you're the best messenger or not means knowing who your audience is. So really thinking about what you're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that actually ties in perfectly to relationship building and networking. And there's a couple of things here. One is, of course, as you just mentioned, on the advocacy side, relationships are a two-way street. It's not what can you do for me, but how can we help each other? Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's no help. It's just getting to know someone. Right. And I mentioned early on that I would say one of the things that inspires me about you, and you know this because we just spoke about it within the last couple of days out in LA, but you have an incredible ability to make everybody feel good all the time. And I know that it is not with a purpose in mind of getting anything out of it. I said, my heart is always happy after I get a chance to visit with you.
Same.
Tell me about, we each network in different ways. We build relationships in ways that really work for our personality, for our interests. How, you say you're a connector of people. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about your strategies for relationship building and networking.
I was listening to one of these interviews that you just recently did. So I'm going to borrow from her. But Shruti was talking about how, especially when you enter a new industry, you have to build a new network. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to what I said before about being inclusive. My building of a network has a lot to do with, and it also helps me to make sure that I am genuinely getting to know the person. Rachel, I love people. I mean, it is a part of who I am. I truly love people. I want to do well by them. I want to help them improve. I love making folks uncomfortable in the way of stretching them. But I think in being inclusive, if I meet you and you remind me of somebody, and then I say, oh, I would love to connect you with this person. If nothing else, I just think you'd hit it off. But maybe there's some way that you can work together. Doing that, and then making sure that you follow up and you can be trusted, and that it's a genuine offer. But for me, it's I really want to get to know the real person, no different than what you're doing, especially now on this platform. So it's probably why I'm smitten with it. But because you're really getting to the heart of the person. I met just when we were in Alice there were folks who've been partners for decades. And as we were sitting there having breakfast, one of them actually turned to the other one and said, I never knew that about you. Yeah. And just building that connection with people. But, authenticity goes a long way, especially when you do enter into a new industry, because there's that sense of, well, we can trust her in our circle. We can bring her in here. And, it's that's a responsibility, I think, especially when you come into a new industry. So for me, just not being afraid to say, well, I've met this person, this would be a good person, and being a serial connector and being inclusive. I always feel like there's enough to go around for everyone, the more that you bring folks to the table together.
Well, and I think that's why so many people then do the same thing back to you. Like, I need you to know, Lisa, if you don't already. I know that
Mhm.
came up when I was talking about actually doing this interview with you. And I mentioned to some people, and then I had the chance to introduce them to you at Alice
Mhm.
in that same idea of, if you don't know Lisa, you should, and here is why. And that takes us perfectly to public speaking. The other reason that, or the other impact that you have had on me, is when I was in a position to source speaking.
Mhm.
You know that I quite often turned to you and said, I need you. I need you in this, on this panel or at this event. And it's because I'm 100% sure that anytime I hear you speak on any topic, you are going to provide value. And that doesn't come naturally. So tell me about, how do you prepare for public speaking? How do you know which ones to select to say yes to? Has public speaking always been a natural talent that you have? Is that from fundraising? Tell me a little bit more about, because for a lot of people, public speaking, they see as their biggest barrier to leadership.
Yes. And I'll start with the last thing you just said. One of my favorite things to do now is to take people who tell me one of their greatest fears is public speaking and turn them into public speakers. And so much so that even within HDG, I initiated that every once in a while. It's like pop quiz, but you just have to stop and do your elevator speech. And we huddle and discuss articles every Friday. And the reason we do it, yes, it's great to like talk about cool topics, sometimes industry, sometimes not. But it's really because there are time parameters set, and everybody, regardless of your role within the management company, has to provide verbal feedback. And the improvements and gains I've seen in people in doing that just make me feel good, because it is an incredible skill set to have. But for me, it did not necessarily come naturally. As a very quiet child, and not that I'm this boisterous person now, but I was very, very quiet, to the point of, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but this is the effect you have, that it was like kindergarten to first grade, that my teacher said that they did not believe that I had the social skills with my peers to be able to advance and be successful moving on in school. I was fine, did my work was fine, but my interactions with my peers, I was extremely quiet. And but my mom knew better, and she's in that space as well. And she said, we're gonna go ahead and move her to the first grade, or whatever grade it was. And then I always admired people who could talk, whether it was in a church setting, but just they could talk and deliver a message, and watching the effect that it would have around people. And so I think one of the things I do to myself is, when I know there's something that I can do, I feel like I can do, I pursue it, and I want to learn it, and I want to get good at it. And I wasn't afraid to be on a stage. I've been in dance my entire life. My mom did it because I was so shy and quiet, and she just wanted me to see if there was a space where I felt I could express myself. So I was 10 years old, 5th grade, went to my elementary school principal and told her in a very business manner that I felt that a student should deliver the remarks at our like red ribbon week assembly, so I can still remember standing there in my red corduroy jumper dress with a white turtleneck, paper shaking, microphone, and saying, so I dare you to say no to drugs and yes to life. I convinced her that I should be like the keynote at a 5th grade assembly. And from there, I wanted to become good at this. It just was in me. Like, I could see the effect that it could have. And I knew I struggled with the one-on-one. That was very hard for me. So I started doing oratorical contests, and I would work on different speech topics, and I would go and I would present. So I got very comfortable in that space. And there's an interesting thing that happens when you do speak. If you can create a sense of relatability, that after the fact, then it does encourage folks to approach you.
Right.
And so at that point, I got really good at the follow-up to a conversation about, why'd you pick that topic? And so funny that speaking to hundreds, if not thousands of people, is what also helped to improve my interpersonal skills, because I knew I had this heart for service and this heart and love for people. I just needed to get better at articulating it to especially within my peer group at that time. So it started very young. And then I kept at it. I stayed practiced. I always put myself forward. When I was 11, I went to the pastor at my church and said, I want to be a reader. And he kind of chuckled and said, "You're 11." And I was like, "I can read." So so he put me through. I'm probably, Rachel, the longest standing reader at our church, just because I did start when I was 11. But I wanted to be better. And I guess I felt there was sort of a calling, and I've used it ever since. And I've used it ever since, but that's how it started. It was very deliberate, intentional pursuit of, I want to be someone that people feel that I'm relatable to them when I deliver a message. And there you have it. So,
Well, again, I mean, the lessons both from being self-aware enough at a young age to see that it could be a weakness for you, at least at that moment, or a challenge for you to overcome, but also that you could be intentional in overcoming it. And now having it be, quite frankly, what you are really well known for in this industry, that's such a great thing to see. And because of that, you showed that this passion for continuous growth. There's something I don't know how to do, or perhaps something I should know how to do. And so I'm going to go out and I'm going to find the resources to make it happen. You are also very well known for being very active at conferences, whether you're speaking or not. Talk about some of the resources that you rely on. And it doesn't have to be the conferences, but how, as you are looking to expand your leadership skills, your people skills, your management style, or even your substantive content, where are you looking for those resources?
So I'm a big believer in borrowing from that which is not your every day-to-day world. So I tend to look, as I look to grow HDG and our folks within it, I watch and borrow and meet and spend time with folks who are in other industries. And maybe that's because it was also my pathway here. So there's nothing about me that is afraid to reach out and say, "Hey, can I come and spend time? I saw that you're working toward this. How is this going? What are you doing?" And so just watching and borrowing from folks who aren't within our industry. I also follow a couple of folks deliberately, just because they are people that I admire. So I'll follow their content. And one of the reasons I kind of picked that handful is because it keeps me disciplined. And I'm not all over the place. I'm able to kind of hone in, but I think it's important to look outside of our own industry. You know, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. So I borrow a lot of what I challenge us to consider, and even like little things that we do within our organization, that they don't come from the hospitality world at all. The conferences for me are still a great source of an education for me. I'm 6 years into this industry, and with as much as it changes all the time, I'm sure there are folks who've been in it for 26 years who are still learning when they attend those conferences. So you can imagine, for me, in terms of industry specific, the conferences provide a tremendous value in expediting my understanding of the nuts and bolts of hospitality.
I feel the same way. And I have been in this industry in different aspects for 26 plus years. And I still learn things. I mean, you know, at Alice this week and at the other conferences, there are different takeaways, substantive and others, that are so important. I want to go back to your journey to leadership for a minute. You mentioned having left a comfortable role that you were very successful at for something completely new. For a cut in pay, completely outside of your background and maybe even your goals at the time. You know, all leaders take risks, and some we choose not to take. How do you evaluate or assess risk, and what have those risks meant as you continue to grow throughout your career?
So one of my mantras is be bold. And I feel that I need to live up to that. And now with my kids, it's something that they hear me say all the time, you know, to put yourself out there. And especially when it comes to decisions, you know, Rachel, there's so much that is not eternal. So you're going to go after it. And it could work, it could not work. Whether it does or doesn't work, it doesn't keep, that is not what's going to keep someone in or out of heaven. Like, I mean, is it eternal? So you can try it. And then if that doesn't work out, guess what? You can try something else. And it doesn't mean that I am flippant or reckless in my decision making. I definitely deliberate and I pray. I believe very much in just that like feeling that you get. And usually it's just like I can feel it. And then I'm like, okay, that means it's time for me to consider doing this, or this is something I need to say yes to, or this is something that I need to decline, which I've learned over the years to get much better at doing. I think that's just a rite of passage, right? When you're, growing up as a professional, but it goes a lot on feel. Thankfully, I have a great support system. So when I have those opportunities, I don't make them in a vacuum. I definitely consult with others, especially on the home front. But I also want to be a good example for my kids and just putting yourself out there and practicing what I preach. So, yeah. And I like fun stuff too. Like I'll be the one that's like, oh, you're trying to put on a fundraiser that people raise money to go rappelling off the side of a building. Well, we're opening a new hotel. So that would be a great way to like open up and launch the hotel. So we're going to raise money for charity. We're going to get people to go rappelling down our hotel. It'll draw attention to the hotel and let's just go. And I'm sure Azim and Nevers were like, what the heck are we allowing this woman to do? I think I'd been with them for like 2 years. And I'm saying, it'll be awesome. We're going to do this. And sure enough. But I think too, in my life, because I have come from the arts world, a lot of what I do, everything feels like a production. But I'm able to kind of put all the pieces together very quickly to evaluate and say, all right, I know it's going to take this, this, and this, but this is going to be the final outcome. So, but I'm a big feel person.
I like that so much because in the opposite way, very data driven, very analytical, but the last moment of the decision is always my gut. So even if all the data, all the analytics go in one way, if my gut doesn't feel like that is the right move, then I won't do it that way. And so the fact that you kind of start there, I think is a really powerful approach.
So, but the cool thing about it is that, so when people talk to me about culture and how do you do that, and I'll say, first you have to define it. What's it going to mean? You've got to be specific. Then you need to program it, and you've got to be disciplined about programming it and then growing it. Don't just keep doing the same thing year after year, either add to it or change it. And then you have to measure it. So it's not that I'm not without the metrics, but I think what's cool about the feeling is that you can make the decision, then you can explore it, and then you don't have to still do it. Like if I go into it and I say, this is going to be awesome. And then I get into it and I'm like, no, it is not. I'm allowed to not jump off that cliff. And I'm allowed to say, I was wrong. That was not where we should have gone. But along the way, I did learn this. And now we're going to go do this. That would just be the one thing I would say about that.
Yeah. And I really like too how as we progress in our career, those of us who have children become very motivated, like you said, of wanting to be a good role model, inspirational to them. My daughters are 21 and 17, and they're behind a lot of the decisions that I make, especially at this stage of my career, because I want them to see mom a certain way, but I also want to live up to what I say. I want to practice what I preach and all of those other things.
Yeah.
Lisa, one of my favorite questions always is when I am asked of it is my advice to my younger self. And the reason I love it so much is I think reflection is critically important, continuous growth. And I'm going to laugh a little bit on the inside since we just had this conversation 2 days ago about different ways that we look at who we thought we'd be, what we thought we'd be doing, what have we learned along the way. But what would you tell 21-year-old Lisa about where you are today that maybe you didn't know or didn't think about at that point?
So I would tell my 21-year-old self, go to New York and try out to be a Rockette. That would be what I would tell my 21-year-old self, because someday you're going to be in your 40s and you're going to look back. But that is one thing that, still to this day, people talk about if you have any regrets, and I think that would be my only one. But for my younger self, I think that, and I knew you were going to ask this question, and I thought about it. I was like, just whatever comes out. Well, you heard what just came out.
I think that is your advice, Lisa. I don't think it has to be.
That just would have, because you're not always going to be 21, and that would be one of the things I would say.
I love that. Well, before we get into your final piece of advice, where today in 2023 is Lisa's happy place? Where is that electric smile flashing the broadest?
Probably has a lot to do with watching what my kids are up to these days. I would tell you, if you're really talking about a physical space, my happy place is in an empty theater. There's nothing like it to me in walking into an empty theater, because I know it's really happening there, just given other life experience. But with my kids and just seeing what they're doing, and that they're such good humans, and their ideas, and helping them to move forward with their ideas, but loving that it's not like they're like, wouldn't this be great to do, and putting it on my plate. Like, they want to know how to do it themselves. So yeah, probably just watching who it is that they're becoming is a very happy place for me.
That's fantastic. Well, as I predicted, we are running short on time. There's still so many things that I want to ask you about. So I will get you back here at some point to finish going through. I mean, you have so many things about culture and developing talent, and building great teams around you, and just so many of the things that professionally you're known for. But what is one piece of final advice, maybe as our audience is sitting there today, whether they are young careerists or established in their careers, that you would want to leave for everyone?
So I don't believe in balance. So for me, I feel that if you're balanced, it means all things are equal, right? And that means, and so I think that feeling centered is extremely important, and just knowing who you are, whose you are, and keeping that focus and carrying that with you, whether it's into your professional space or your personal space, and being consistent with that, it's not about being balanced. It is about being centered. And then my mom always said to me, work hard, do the right thing, and be gracious. And I added to it and said, and have a sense of humor. So that would be, just make sure that along the way you are laughing. It's extremely, extremely important, I think, to life.
I love that so much. Lisa Lombardo, on behalf of an entire industry, but also for myself, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for your leadership, and for always being willing to share and spend time in service to others and in giving back. We are incredibly grateful.
Rachel, I love you. Thank you so much for this time with you.
And if you liked the content that you heard today, we hope you'll go over to deiadvisors.org or find us on any of your favorite streaming channels. But thank you for tuning in to DEI Advisors. And Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.